It is 2025, and in today's video, we're going to take some projects from 2024 and either flip them, fix them, or just update them a bit. This is a toolbox that I started months ago, and it has been painted a couple different ways, even spray painted at one point, but I've decided to go ahead and try out some decoupage on this box. This beautiful paper is from Sonnet's Maker's Box from December, and it is called, oh, I just had the name, Rustic Pine Cone. And this is one of Rocycled's decoupage papers that is exclusively available from Sonnet's box. I am going to find parts of this paper, and I want to cover the entire base of the box all the way around. I thought it would be too difficult to wrap the decoupage paper around. I have done it before, but this box is not as, I guess, even when you have it on its side like this, it is going to wobble on the other side because of the hinges on the back. So I am going to very carefully use a artist brush and some water and just create a wet spot so I can very gently tear the amount of decoupage paper I need for each of the four sides of the box. Now I'm going to use DIY's liquid patina as my decoupage medium, and I'm going to start by misting the decoupage paper just a bit. So I'm going to decoupage half of it on and then lift up the other side and have the other side come down. As you will see, there is a spot in the middle where there is a latch. I did have to very gently rip between those two just to get the decoupage paper to go all the way around the little latch in the middle. Once that paper is decoupaged on, I'm taking my liquid patina and covering the entire paper while it is still wet with that liquid patina. And then I'm going to set aside and let it dry. I decided not to do each of the sides of the box until the side before it was dry. I didn't video each side that I decoupaged, but what I want to say is that I sanded the paper after it was dry just to make those clean edges before I decoupaged the next side. I did this just because sometimes I previously in other projects have run into an issue where I end up ripping the paper that is on the corner if I'm trying to do that while the other paper is still wet. And so it's just much easier if I have that part clean before I move on to the next step. Another thing that happened with this paper as I was sanding it down is there were some parts that were not all the way down. You'll see here I have to go in with an artist brush and some more liquid patina just to make sure that all of the edges of the decoupage paper are fully adhered to the box. I painted the top of the box in Eden, which is one of the new DIY paint colors. It is a clay-based paint, so it does have to be sealed. I'm now using some Varathane sealer. It is in a satin finish to just give it a little bit of the shimmer that you would typically see with a toolbox. I am not going to be painting the hardware in this color because I'm going to come back in after this is done and do the trim and the hardware with some gold paint. Now that that sealer is dry, I'm going to take some Luxe Metallic Paint by Paint Couture in the color Antique Gold, and I am going to paint all the handle and all of the hardware as well as the trim that wraps around. It's almost like a lip that wraps around the top and the bottom part where the lid and the base of the toolbox touch. When the Luxe Metallics paint is dry, I do come back with the Eden and just fix some of the spots that I missed and then seal it up again, and here's a look at our final project. For our next project, I have this Melissa and Doug bin that I have had in my stash for a long time. I last year used some little feet, some little knobs to make feet, and then I had painted it and I tried using the Le Courier stamp by IOD, and when I did that I ended up blurring the stamp. I messed it up. So I'm going to fix that today and finish up this once and for all. This is my biggest problem that I have, is leaving things half done, which creates a huge mess and a lot of disorganization in my craft room. So one of my goals for 2025 is to do that less. So for this project, what I'm going to do now is I am going to take some of this paint by Paint Couture, and I believe this is driftwood, and it is an all-in-one paint. You saw me use this paint last week on my video about the different kinds of paints that I have tried over the course of the last couple years. And this one has a really good amount of coverage. Like I've said before, it's not necessarily, Paint Couture is not my favorite of all the paints, but it does cover nicely, and it is pretty, reasonable as far as price, especially because you can get smaller containers of it. I end up using 2 coats on the front, back, sides, top, bottom, everything except for the feet of this tray. This is Antique Gold, which is a luxe metallic paint by Paint Couture. Now what I want to show you is what that paint will look like when you first open the container. As you can see, it has this green residue on the top. That is part of the paint. So you will need to stir this paint pretty well before you start using it on any of your projects. If you don't use the paint regularly, or if you maybe are opening it for the first time, those are some things you're going to notice. It does not mean the paint is ruined. You just have to make sure you stir it. That's pretty much a good rule of thumb for any of the paint from any brand that you use. If you think there's something wrong with it, start by stirring it and see what happens. I painted the feet of this riser with 2 coats of that luxe metallic paint in Antique Gold. Here's a quick peek at what that riser looks like so far, but before I give you the full reveal with all of the beautiful elements of a vignette, I wanted to show you one more thing I created that will be styled with this beautiful tray. I took this mini crock that I created a while ago, and I got out some foam clay, some of this foam clay that I have shown you guys before, and I wrapped it all the way around that little mini crock. I then tried to do an impression using the antiquity stamp, as you can see here, but it did not work out well. So I just embraced the actual indentations and all of like the character that the foam already had in it, just patting it down, taking away any of the impression that I had just tried to create. And then I just kind of pushed in different parts just to give it a little bit more, I don't know, dimension to this little crock that I'm turning into a mini vase. I started out painting this vase in that driftwood paint. I honestly don't remember if this is the chalk paint version or the all-in-one, but either way, I decided that it was a little bit too plain looking for what I really wanted, the effect I really wanted to get with this little vase. So I actually decided to come back in and paint the entire thing with that Antique Gold Luxe Metallic paint by Paint Couture. After 2 coats, I didn't feel that this needed anything else. I didn't add in any wax or glaze or anything. I left it as is. I really liked the way that the foam clay created this weird texture, and I don't know, I mean, it adds something a little bit different to a vignette, as you can see here. I created this wood tote a while ago, and I tried using a paint inlay from the Christmas release set, and it did not go well. So I have painted over that, and now I'm going to be using some of Rocycled's Decoupage paper. I can't remember the name of this, but I will make sure I keep it, or I look for it and put it in the description box below. And I'm going to put this on just the front and back of this wooden tote. Right now, what you see me doing is figuring out the best place to use this. I have been saving this decoupage paper because I really wanted to find a perfect piece to put the entire thing on and keep that beautiful wreath there, but I couldn't find it. I also am not a huge fan of the crown that's on the top, so I figured if there was a way that I could use this design and use one part for the front and then another part for the back and still maintain some character so it didn't look so obviously like it had been broken up into multiple pieces, I thought that that would be the best way to use it. I absolutely absolutely love the stripes that are behind this design. As you saw me do in the previous project, I am going to start out on one side, create a starter strip with that liquid patina, lay my Rocycled decoupage paper down. It has been lightly misted with some water, and then work my way across the piece. Finish this side with that last layer of liquid patina across the top of the paper, and then I will set it aside to dry before I sand down and flip this over to do the other side with the rest of the paper. Here is that second side, which is already dry, and I am going to take my finger sander and very lightly sand in a downward motion the same way every time to sand off the excess paper. Because I'm painting on white paint, I will need at least 2 coats of the cast iron. I also want to mention that it is an all-in-one paint, but one thing that I have learned from some of these mistake projects that I'm fixing today is that I will need to ensure that this paint has at least 21 days to cure. Otherwise, it will chip off. It will not be as durable. It's something I want to remind you about because I didn't really think about that carefully when I was storing my projects after I finished them last year. So that is something I'm going to be very mindful of. I'm setting up a space where I will leave these projects until they are fully cured. I do not want to have to keep fixing my projects. I have another riser that had a pretty bad paint job on it. It had what I tried to do was a faux stain and it did not look great. So I actually sanded it down already. It also had a couple other layers of paint underneath, so I sanded it down as much as I could. And now I'm going to be using Eucalyptus by Fusion. Once again, this is an all-in-one paint. I'm going to give the entire piece 1 to 2 coats. I feel like I ended up doing maybe 1.5 coats of this paint. I'm not as worried about full coverage because I will be sanding back a good amount of it. Okay, I have now sanded this down, as you can see, and I wanted it to look very like old and like like a lot of the paint's chipping away. I'm going to use this transfer on it. This is from the Collage de Fleurs transfer set by IOD. I'm almost positive. I'm trying to use up what's in my stash, and I also did not do the best job organizing things last year, so bear with me as I try to remember all this. My sister got me a brand new cart for Christmas, so I have everything really close by now instead of having to walk around my craft room to find everything I need. So that's nice. It's not completely organized yet. It's not finished, but it's getting there. I will probably sand this down just slightly so that it doesn't look so new against the more aged riser. Let's see. So this is like a 400 grit, so it's like barely anything. It feels like super smooth. I've noticed that if I try to sand too quickly, I end up sanding down more than I anticipate. Once everything is sanded to my liking, I grab some DIY dark wax and I am going to wax over any of the more white spots from the transfer, and I'm going to have some extra emphasis on the edges of the riser, but I do end up putting wax all over the top, bottom, sides of the riser. I do want it to look cohesive, and the best way to do that is to ensure that everything is getting that dark wax. Once I've covered the entire riser and allowed it to soak in a bit, I come in with a microfiber cloth and wipe back any excess. This is a little shelf sitter that I decided to make reversible. One side for winter and one side for maybe early spring. This side will get one of Connie's papers from Connie's Lines and Designs, and this is one of the papers that was in Sonnet's Maker's Box from December. And then the other side will get a beautiful rabbit that is from Decoupage Central. After I decoupage on both sides, I cover the sides with some cast iron by Fusion, and now I can add it to various vignettes throughout the winter and early spring. So with this piece, I have a little bit of bleed through that happened. You can see when I did the stenciling, there was a little white mark left. I have a chip that's happened since then. Some scuffs of another paint on top, and this is not a good finish here. Just a lot of things I learned. Oh, and look at this. 2 different colors. Didn't even notice. Oh my. Yes, this was one of my very first risers I made when I first started trying to figure out how to do this. So we are going to sand this down and start over. Okay, here we have another, this is the self-leveling Paint Couture in Autumn Sage. And I don't know if you can tell all of that liquid that's come to the top. That's probably the, it looks more oily, so it's probably the sealer. So once again, we're going to stir it to bring it all together before we use it. I'm going to give this entire riser 2 coats of that Autumn Sage Paint Couture color. And one thing I've learned too is to try to avoid using multiple colors on projects like this. That's another reason that I get myself I end up making the project almost harder than it has to be. It can still be a beautiful riser or a beautiful project with the one color. I don't need any fancy designs or anything. I mean, that's just kind of where I'm at right now with some of these projects I'm trying to fix up and still make look beautiful. I'm going to save all the fancy add-ons and things like that, or multiple colors on a project, for when I get better at this. I think that's one of the things that I've really learned to try to focus on, is really focusing on the details and making sure it's quality over quantity. Now I'm going to take these 2 gorgeous and big rose transfers by IOD, and I am going to place them strategically onto the riser so that I have some of the leaves and some of the petals going over each of the sides of this riser. I want to make sure that if I have, let's say, the leaves coming down the front on one side, I want the other rose to kind of have, are these roses? Now I'm worried that I'm not saying the right flower. But anyway, I want to make sure those petals are coming down on the other side. So you'll get to see some of the petals and some of the leaves on both sides of the riser. I'm going to seal this with 2 coats of gator hide. This is a new sealer to me. It is by Dixie Belle, and the reason I chose it was because it is water resistant and also creates a very matte finish from what I have heard. So I'm trying out a bunch of sealers the same way I tried out a bunch of paints. I just like to, test things out on my own and really decide for myself what I prefer. I will definitely give you a review on all of the sealers I've used at some point this year. I just want to be able to try a wider variety before I do that. After I had looked at my piece, once it had dried, I noticed that there was a couple of parts of the transfer that didn't fully adhere, especially on the edge, like around the side. So I ended up just very lightly sanding and distressing back some of the transfer to kind of sand back those pieces that hadn't fully adhered, and then also to create that kind of cohesive age across the entire riser. Now I'm going to be using some of this antiquing glaze, and this is also by Dixie Belle. I believe this is the Van Dyke Brown glaze, and I'm going to cover the entire piece with this glaze, let it sit for a bit, and then wipe back the excess. I have these business cards that I made. I made them very simple on purpose because I thought the QR code would be a perfect way to advertise. Here's my problem. This QR code for YouTube works perfectly. And then I have like a place to put the price tag here, or the price. This QR code doesn't work. I didn't realize that when I created it using a program that was kind of a free trial type thing, and I never paid for it. And so now this QR code doesn't work. So I have to fix that, but I don't want to ruin the 500 or throw away the 500 tags that I had made. So I'm going to take my hole puncher and punch the hole there. So when I tie the price tag on, it will basically take away the ability for anybody to use this QR code, which doesn't work anyway. So that's the plan. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have enjoyed today's video. Please comment below, let me know what was your favorite project, and let me know what are some goals that you have for 2025. I have a lot of them, and you will see a lot of them coming soon. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you again next time.